I had waited 4 long years for this moment, clinging to hope, through every disappointment, praying for a miracle that sometimes felt like it would never come. And then finally it did. The day I held the ultrasound picture in my trembling hands, my heart overflowed with a joy so fierce it almost hurt. I wanted to surprise Daniel with it, to give him the gift of life we had longed for, wrapped in the purest happiness. But when he saw the image instead of the bright smile I had dreamed of, his brows furrowed and his eyes darkened with suspicion. 7 weeks, he muttered, his voice heavy with doubt. That doesn't make sense. He lifted his gaze to me, confusion and mistrust battling across his face. I was away on business until the 17th. It hasn't even been 35 days since I came back. How can this baby already be over 40 days along? His words pierced me like a knife. My chest tightened and I could barely breathe. What was he implying? I stared at him, my pulse thundering in my ears. You don't believe me? You think this child isn't yours? The joy I had felt moments ago was extinguished like cold water poured over a fragile flame. My smile froze, my hands shook, and I felt my world collapsing. How had it come to this? How could the man I had loved and trusted for years look at me with such doubt? 6 years earlier, we had met through Susan Parker, a family acquaintance who thought we would make a good match. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, but it was steady and true. Daniel was honest, kind, and dependable, and though our marriage was arranged in a way, our love had grown naturally. We slipped into marriage as though it were the most obvious path, certain we were building something solid. In the first 2 years, we were carefree, not rushing to have children, savoring the freedom of being just us. We were young, healthy, rarely even catching a cold, and assumed children would come easily when the time was right. But as our friends one by one announced pregnancies and our parents began to gently pressure us, the desire grew stronger. I still remember the sparkle in Daniel's eyes as he watched videos of laughing babies online. Emily, he said with a hopeful grin, maybe it's time we had one of our own. When Margaret, my mother-in-law, learned we were trying, she packed her bags and moved straight into our suburban New Jersey home. I'll take care of you, she promised, her hand gripping mine as tears welled in her eyes. The Millers have had only one son each generation. Before Daniel's father passed, his greatest regret was not living long enough to see his grandchild. If you give us a grandson, Emily, it will be the greatest blessing this family has ever received. Her words pressed heavily on me, but before I could respond, Daniel chuckled, taking my hand. Mom, don't say things like that. You'll scare her. A granddaughter would be just as precious. Honestly, I'd prefer a girl. Daughters are sweet and gentle. Margaret laughed nervously, backing off. You're right. Whatever child Emily gives us, I'll love just the same. Emily, if you crave anything, tell me, I'll cook it. And Daniel, your wife needs peace of mind now. Don't you dare upset her. Their warmth wrapped around me, and for a while, happiness filled our home. Everything was ready, it seemed, except for the baby, who refused to come. 3 months passed, then 6. My period came like clockwork each month, leaving me in tears, but both Daniel and Margaret reassured me. It's early, Daniel said. Don't worry, sweetheart. Margaret cooked elaborate meals, changing the menu daily, in hopes of nourishing fertility. A year slipped by, and still nothing. Margaret's patience frayed. Her sighs grew louder, her glances sharper. Then one night, as Daniel and I were preparing for bed, she stormed into our room. Her face flushed with anger, clutching a small box. With a sharp flick of her wrist, she hurled it onto the bed. So this is why you failed, she shouted. You're still using these. I froze, staring at the box. Condoms, the box we had shoved in a drawer years ago before we ever tried for a baby, untouched, forgotten. My blood ran cold. How had it ended up in her hands? There was only one explanation. Margaret had gone through our things. Daniel's face stiffened, his jaw tight with embarrassment. Mom, he said, his voice strained. You went through our room, our drawers. She glared at him. Don't change the subject. Daniel, be honest with me. Does Emily not want children? Have you both been lying to me all this time? My throat burned as I tried to speak. That's not true, I said, my voice breaking. No one can control when it happens. Do you think we haven't been trying? Do you think this is my choice? Daniel backed me up, his voice steady, though his face was pale. Mom, you're out of line. Pregnancy isn't instant. You can't just accuse Emily like this. But Margaret's eyes remained cold, filled with disappointment. I gave up my life to stay here cooking and caring for you both. I sacrificed so much, and what have I gotten in return? Nothing. No child. No grandchild. Her words cut deep, leaving me trembling. That night, as Daniel held me, I couldn't stop the tears. 4 years of hope, of crushed dreams, of being watched and judged like a specimen. And now finally I carried life within me, and the very people who should have cherished it looked at me with suspicion instead. I had thought the miracle would bring us closer, that Daniel would embrace me with tears of joy. Instead, I stood in our bedroom clutching that fragile ultrasound picture while doubt poisoned the air between us. My heart was breaking, but I forced myself to breathe, knowing this was only the beginning of a battle I never imagined I would face. Mom, I know you're worried, but you can't just barge into our room and go through our things like that. Daniel said, his voice tight, his face stiff as stone. His words were firm, and for a moment Margaret's expression faltered. She narrowed her eyes, pressing him further, her tone laced with disbelief. Really, is that the truth? He nodded sharply. Yes. Now please, Mom, it's late. Go back to your room and rest. Margaret finally relented, though her shoulders still bristled with irritation. Just as she turned to leave, she threw one last dagger over her shoulder at me. Emily, you're almost 30 now. A man can father children at any age, but a woman's time is limited. I only do this because I care about you. Tomorrow I'll prepare a traditional remedy I found. 3 times a day I'll brew it and pour it into a thermos for you to take to work. It will help. The next morning, the bitter smell of herbs filled the kitchen, stronger than any medicine I had ever known. She handed me a thermos with a tight smile. Drink it all. It may taste awful, but it will do you good. Day after day, month after month, I forced down that vile concoction, my body rebelling against it. For 2 years, I swallowed her so-called cure until my hormones spiraled out of control. My face erupted in angry breakouts, and my figure became unrecognizable even to myself. The mirror no longer reflected the woman I had once been, and Margaret's patience drained as quickly as my health. Her kindness vanished, replaced by a watchful coldness. Every month on the day my period came, I would slip into the bathroom with quiet dread. Minutes later, she would storm in after me, digging through the trash to find proof of my failure. The moment she spotted the evidence, her sighs would echo through the house like a death knell, and her face would cloud with disappointment for the rest of the day. I began to wonder what sins I had committed in a past life to deserve such punishment. Other women seemed to conceive as effortlessly as breathing, yet here I was suffocating under the weight of expectation, guilt, and shame. One evening, when Margaret's muttered complaints grew unbearable, I finally snapped. Having a baby isn't just my responsibility. Why do you keep hinting that it's only me at fault? My voice shook, but it carried years of pent-up pain. Margaret's eyes hardened. You're a woman. Bearing children is your duty. If it isn't your fault, then whose is it? A fire burned in my chest. Fine, I spat, my hands trembling. If you think I'm the problem, I'll go get tested. If it's true, if I'm the reason, I'll divorce Daniel right away so he can give you a grandchild with someone else. But if the results show that he's the one with the issue, then don't you dare try to ruin my life. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Daniel, who had been silent, finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. Emily, what are you saying? There's nothing wrong with me. Why should I be tested? Besides, men don't do things like that. If people found out, how humiliating would that be? Margaret slammed her hands on her hips, siding with her son immediately. Exactly. My son is perfectly healthy. If anyone has a problem, it's you. Her voice rose with indignation, pointing at me as if I were an accused criminal. Emily, I've given up everything, even my hobbies, just to take care of you. I've cooked for you, cleaned for you, devoted myself like a servant. All I asked for in return was one grandchild, just one, and you couldn't even give me that. How can you be so heartless, letting me down like this? Her face twisted with fury, her cheeks flushed crimson, her voice sharp enough to cut. Daniel isn't getting any younger. If you really are the problem, then don't waste his life. Let him go. Let's separate peacefully before it's too late. I stared at her, my chest tight, my skin prickling with an icy fear. In that moment, I realized just how many faces a person could wear. On my wedding day, my parents had spared her the burden of a dowry, sympathizing with her years of single-handedly raising Daniel after his father died. They had even given us half of their apartment so Daniel and I could have a stable home. I still remembered how Margaret had wept as she clutched my hands that day, promising in front of my parents that she would treat me as her own daughter, that she would love me as if I were her flesh and blood. And now here she was, spitting venom at me, ready to cast me aside, as though I were nothing more than a failed vessel. Slowly I turned to Daniel, the man I had loved and trusted all these years, the man whose silence hurt more than Margaret's cruel words. My voice was steady, each syllable cutting through the thick air. "Daniel, what do you think?" He couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. After a long silence, he finally murmured, "Emily, just go to the hospital tomorrow. Get checked. If there's a problem, we'll deal with it. I won't leave you." A bitter laugh slipped past my lips. So that was it. In his eyes, I was already guilty, already the one at fault. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "We'll go tomorrow. Enough is enough." In that moment, I felt something in me break. Years of swallowing Margaret's bitter bruise, of enduring her stares, of shouldering the crushing weight of her disappointment, all of it hardened into resolve. I had taken enough blame, enough humiliation. If the truth lay hidden in tests and numbers, then I would drag it into the light, no matter the cost. The next morning, I didn't give Daniel a choice. I pulled him out of bed and told him to get dressed. He muttered excuses about his pride, about what people would say if they knew, but I didn't care anymore. "Either you come with me," I said coldly, "or I file for divorce today." His face paled, and at last he followed me. Margaret sneered when she saw us heading out. "Good, let's settle this once and for all. I want to see who dares speak so boldly after the results." I didn't look at her. My heart was already too heavy, my body too tired, but my spirit was unyielding. This was the moment I had been waiting for. No more whispers, no more shadows, only the truth. At first, Daniel refused, outright clinging to his pride like a shield. He muttered excuses about reputation and dignity, shaking his head as though a simple medical test would strip him of his manhood. I stood there weary and hollow and told him quietly that if he didn't come with me, I would file for divorce. The word divorce silenced him, and for the first time in years, he looked frightened of losing me. He gave in reluctantly, dragging his feet, his jaw clenched tight. Margaret watched us from the doorway, her lips twisting into a smug little smile. "Fine," she said coldly. "Let's get everything checked. I want to see who still dares to talk so big once the results come back." I ignored her and marched Daniel into New York Presbyterian's reproductive health clinic. My hands shook as I filled out the forms, signing us both in for every test on the list. Daniel scowled under his breath, grumbling, "This is ridiculous." Margaret chuckled darkly, sliding into a chair beside him. "It's nothing, son. Think of it as a regular checkup. When the results come, some people will finally have to eat their words." Daniel glanced at me as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he looked away silent. Hours passed in a blur of needle samples and examinations. By midday, my body ached. My head throbbed, but I endured it all. Finally, Dr. Robert Wilson stepped into the room. His face gave a folder of results in his hand. My heart pounded as he read through the papers. He looked at me first. "Emily, everything is normal. No issues detected." For the first time in years, relief surged through me. But it was fleeting because Dr. Wilson then turned to Daniel, his expression heavy. "Mr. Miller, your sperm analysis shows only 8% meeting the standards for quality and motility. To put it simply, you're suffering from severe asthenosospermia. It will be extremely difficult for you to father a child naturally." The room went deathly silent. I stared at the report, my eyes burning, the cold truth slamming into me. Margaret froze in her chair, her lips trembling. "What? No. How can this be?" Daniel collapsed back. His face ghostly pale, his body limp as though his very soul had been drained. Dr. Wilson softened his voice. "It doesn't mean impossible. With treatment, lifestyle changes, and patience, there is still a chance. But the odds are low." We all knew the meaning between his words. A chance so slim, it was nearly non-existent. Margaret sat there in stunned silence, her arrogance shattered. She couldn't meet my eyes. I let out a bitter laugh, tilting my head toward her. "So now you know. It isn't me. Do your words still stand? Every insult, every accusation, do they still count?" Her face flamed crimson with shame, her mouth opening and closing without sound. At last she forced a weak smile. "Emily, my dear, don't say that. Marriage is about love, about standing by each other. You and Daniel have been together for years. You can't just throw that away." Daniel finally lifted his head, his eyes red and desperate. He reached for me like a drowning man. "Emily, I'm sorry. Please don't leave me. Forget what Mom said. She was wrong. I'm the one at fault. Please, I beg you, don't walk away." Margaret nodded rapidly. her voice unrecognizable from her usual sharpness. Yes, yes, Emily, consider me foolish. I'm old and uneducated. I said terrible things, but I only wanted what was best. Don't hold it against me. Then shockingly, she sank to her knees before me. My heart jolted and I rushed to pull her up, startled by the sight of tears streaming down her wrinkled face. I'm at my wit's end, she sobbed. What parent doesn't want happiness for their child? I was wrong, Emily. Please forgive me. I had never imagined the fierce, domineering Margaret Miller reduced to this. My anger softened despite myself. I thought of the years Daniel had treated me kindly, the way he had once held my hand through storms. Perhaps I told myself love was enough. Perhaps children were not everything. As long as our marriage remained intact, maybe we could endure this together. With that realization, the crushing weight on my chest eased. I no longer had to swallow Margaret's bitter herbal remedies. The pressure had shifted, no longer mine to bear. Slowly my body recovered, my skin cleared, my figure returned. Meanwhile, Daniel and his mother lived under a new shadow. His silence grew heavier, her sighs more frequent, but I let it be. For once, the burden was not mine. Time passed until 3 days ago. I noticed something strange. My period was late, more than a week late. My heart skipped and a strange hope bloomed inside me. I rushed back to the hospital, trembling as I waited for the doctor's words. And then Dr. Wilson smiled gently. Congratulations, Mrs. Miller, you're 7 weeks pregnant. The baby is healthy, developing normally. Joy exploded inside me, radiant and blinding. At last, the miracle I had dreamed of. I decided to keep the secret until Daniel's birthday to give him the greatest gift of his life. I imagined his face lighting up, the laughter, the tears of joy. But reality was crueler. When I handed him the ultrasound picture on his birthday, his reaction was nothing like I had dreamed. He turned the paper over and over in his hands, his brows knitting tighter each second. Instead of joy, there was suspicion in his eyes. 7 weeks. That can't be right. My smile faltered. He shook his head, frowning. Emily, don't take this the wrong way, but how can this be? I've been gone for work since the 17th. We haven't even been together 35 days. How can the baby be more than 40 days old? The words stabbed at me all over again, crueler than any knife. I felt the same icy water douse my heart as before, watching disbelief and doubt replace what should have been happiness. Daniel's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. I just don't get it, Emily. We've only been together since the 17th, and yet the doctor says 7 weeks. How does that make sense? His brows furrowed, deeper suspicion shadowing his face. The faint smile on Margaret's lips froze, and slowly it melted into something darker. She turned toward me, her eyes narrowing as though she were peeling back layers of my skin. She's right, Daniel. Margaret murmured, her voice heavy with doubt. Pregnancy is good news, yes, but if what you say is true, the timeline doesn't match. Maybe the hospital made a mistake. Daniel cut her off sharply, waving the paper in his hand. No, Mom, it's written here plain as day. Intrauterine pregnancy approximately 7 weeks. Machines don't lie. These are medical measurements. Still, Margaret's eyes clung to me, her gaze dripping with accusation. If the hospital isn't wrong, she said slowly, then where is the problem? Something inside me snapped. I snatched the ultrasound report out of Daniel's hands, my laugh brittle like glass breaking. Stop this little performance, both of you, Daniel. Why don't you just say it straight? What are you implying? Do you even want this baby? If not, I'll take care of it tomorrow. The words flew out of me like fire, scorching everything in their path. Daniel's face drained of color, his mouth opening in shock. Emily, don't say things like that. Margaret shot him a look, a silent command, her eyes urging him to calm me. He stammered, fumbling for words. Honey, you're overreacting. I didn't mean I don't want the baby. I just asked a question. Isn't a husband allowed to ask? The timing doesn't add up, that's all. I need to understand. But what he didn't understand was how deeply his doubt cut into me. The child growing inside me was the miracle I had waited for, cried for, prayed for. And instead of joy, I was met with suspicion, as though I were guilty of some crime. My fists clenched until my nails bit into my palms. I drew in a shaking breath, grabbed my phone, and pulled up a medical website. Here I said, thrusting the screen toward him, enunciating each word. Can you use some basic knowledge for once? Who told you that gestational age is counted from the day we had sex? Look, it's calculated from the first day of the last menstrual cycle. I had my period on July 2nd. You came back on the 17th. Today is August 20th. 7 weeks exactly. According to medical standards, this is correct. Mother and son leaned over my phone, their eyes scanning the words as if searching for loopholes. I waited, thinking relief would flood their faces, that they would finally understand, finally apologize. But when Daniel handed the phone back, his expression was as cold as stone. I don't get all these theories, he said flatly. All I know is that we've only been together once since the 17th. How is the baby already 7 weeks? And after all these years, with nothing suddenly right, after I get back from a business trip, you're pregnant. It just doesn't feel right. My stomach dropped. My legs threatened to buckle beneath me. The man I loved was not only doubting me, he was erasing science logic, everything just to cling to his suspicion. The next thing I knew, we were in the car, Daniel gripping the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. We're going to the hospital, he said. His voice was tense, clipped final. At New York Presbyterian, Dr. Robert Wilson greeted us with his usual calm. I explained everything, the timeline, Daniel's doubts, Margaret's accusations. I begged him with my eyes to help them understand. Daniel forced a smile, scratching the back of his head, pretending humility. Doctor, it's not that we don't believe you, it's just we don't understand how the weeks are counted. Could you explain? Dr. Wilson hesitated, then nodded, launching into a careful explanation of gestational age, the counting from the last menstrual cycle, the medical accuracy of ultrasound measurements. His words were clear, precise. But Daniel's face remained shadowed, his brows furrowed. Yes, but Daniel interrupted, his voice stubborn. We were only together on the 17th. How can the baby already be 7 weeks? The doctor adjusted his glasses, repeating patiently. Gestational age is not counted from the date of conception. It's from the cycle. This is standard worldwide. Still, Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line, his head shaking as if the explanation slid off him. His cheeks flushed with something between embarrassment and defiance. And then, as though cornered, he blurted it out. Doctor, I'll be honest. I have severe male infertility. Years ago, I saw specialists. They all told me my chances of fathering a child were almost zero. Last month, I was with Emily only once. So you tell me, how could she possibly be pregnant now? The room froze. Dr. Wilson's expression stiffened, his eyes flickering toward me with something that felt like pity. My breath caught in my throat, the world spinning. The weight of Daniel's words crushed me, pressing the air from my lungs. I had endured years of Margaret's remedies, years of whispered blame, years of staring into the mirror, wondering what was wrong with me. And now, when at last life bloomed within me, Daniel stood before a doctor and essentially accused me of betrayal, of carrying another man's child. My vision blurred with tears, but my voice rose trembling with fury. Are you insane, Daniel? Do you even hear yourself? I've prayed for this baby, begged God for this baby, and the first thing you do is accuse me. This is our child, Daniel. Our child? But he only shook his head, his voice low and maddeningly calm. I'm not accusing you, I just want to be sure. To him, it was nothing but a logical question. To me, it was the deepest wound, the cruelest insult. And in that sterile hospital room, under the cold fluorescent lights, I realized the truth. No matter how much evidence, no matter how much science, Daniel had already decided what to believe. It felt like a blade slicing straight through my heart. For years, I had endured in silence, swallowing humiliation, biting back tears, forcing myself to carry burdens that weren't mine. But now every wound, every insult, every injustice that I had buried rose up inside me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me. I fixed my eyes on Daniel, my voice shaking with rage. Are you out of your mind? Do you even hear yourself? I've prayed for this child, begged God for this child, and now that my miracle has finally come, you have the audacity to suggest it isn't yours, he scowled, irritation flickering across his features. When did I ever say that? All I asked was for the doctor to double-check. That's it, Dr. Robert Wilson, sensing the storm about to explode, stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Miller, weak sperm does not mean zero chance. It means the probability is low but not impossible. A pregnancy is unlikely, but it can still happen. For a moment, hope glimmered faintly in Daniel's eyes, but just as quickly it was extinguished, replaced by stubborn doubt. But I still don't understand why the timeline doesn't make sense, he pressed. Dr. Wilson adjusted his glasses, choosing his words carefully. The timeline does make sense. As I explained earlier, gestational age is calculated from the first day of the last menstrual period, not the date of conception. But I could see it in Daniel's face. He wasn't here to learn. He wasn't seeking truth. He was here to confirm the suspicion already festering inside him. No matter how much I explained, no matter how clear the science, he had already decided not to believe me. And then in the midst of that suffocating silence, Margaret's voice slithered into the room, low and sharp, but loud enough for me to hear. No baby for years, and now suddenly she's pregnant right after my son goes away on business. And the dates don't match. Who knows if this child even belongs to us? Her words struck me like a lightning bolt. My hands trembled as fury coursed through my veins, my body shaking so hard I could barely stand. Slowly I raised a finger and pointed directly at her, my voice breaking into a scream. Do you have no shame? This is how you speak about your own grandchild. Margaret straightened, rolling up her sleeves like she was preparing for battle. Her voice rose into a shrill, venomous pitch. Shame. You think I should be ashamed for asking questions? My son's away working, and you claim to be working late every night. Who knows where you've been, or who's been driving you home? This is about blood, Emily, about our family's future. If you had nothing to hide, why are you so defensive? My chest heaved with ragged breaths. I felt as if the walls were closing in on me, crushing me beneath their weight. Fine, I shouted, my voice raw. If you believe this baby isn't Daniel's, then I'll end it. I'll get an abortion, and then I'll divorce him. Is that what you want? The room fell silent. Daniel sat frozen like a block of stone, not moving, not speaking, not even trying to stop me. Minutes stretched into eternity before he finally lifted his head, turning slowly toward Dr. Wilson, his face pale, his eyes hollow. Doctor, he asked hesitantly, is there a way to test if the baby is really mine, while it's still in the womb? Dr. Wilson stiffened, his lips pressing together. For a moment he didn't speak, then finally said, Yes, there is a non-invasive prenatal paternity test, but you should know. Emily, it carries risks. It can increase the chance of miscarriage. It is not a decision to take lightly. Daniel's eyes flickered with fear. I could see the battle inside him. He wanted proof, but he didn't want to risk losing the very child he claimed to doubt. Before he could answer, Margaret clapped her hands together as if she had just solved a grand puzzle. Then we'll wait. No need to risk the baby. We'll test after it's born. 9 months from now, if it's truly our bloodline, of course we'll accept it. But if not, her lips curled into a cruel smile, her eyes glinting with malice. Then you divorce, and we move on. She turned to me, her voice dripping with mockery. Emily, you've been swearing this baby is Daniel's, so surely you won't object to such a simple condition, will you? A laugh burst from my throat, bitter and hollow. What a convenient arrangement. You want me to carry this child for 9 months to endure every ache, every risk, every ounce of fear, just to prove my innocence. You want me to bring a life into this world, just so I can stand trial in your court of judgment. And on what grounds? Who gave you that right? Why should my baby suffer humiliation to satisfy your poisonous doubts? I turned to Daniel, my eyes blazing with fury and heartbreak. I'll ask you once, Daniel Miller, do you even want this child? He lifted his gaze, conflict twisting his features. For a long time he said nothing. Then finally, in a voice so weak it barely sounded like him, he whispered, I do, but only after the test. Once the baby is born, once the DNA confirms it, if it's really mine, I'll accept it fully. The words landed like stones on my chest. So that's it, I said softly, my lips curling into a cold smile. You want me to wait 9 months under suspicion to raise a baby in the shadow of doubt, only for you to decide later whether it's worthy of your love. My laughter cracked in the sterile air of the hospital, echoing like broken glass. At that moment, staring at the man I had once trusted with my whole soul, I knew something inside me had shattered beyond repair. Emily. It's just 9 months, Daniel said flatly, his voice dripping with condescension. If the baby is mine, then the DNA test will prove it. What's the big deal? Why are you so worked up? The arrogance in his tones seared through me. Truly, it was the pinnacle of insult. I didn't even spare him another glance. Without a word, I grabbed my purse, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out of New York Presbyterian, my heels striking the floor with sharp defiance. By the time I reached the parking lot, my face was numb with rage. I drove home in silence, my chest tight, my mind whirling. Once inside, I moved like someone possessed. I dragged a suitcase from the closet, threw in a few sets of clothes, slammed it shut, and wheeled it out to the car. I didn't tell Daniel a word. I didn't owe him one. My heart was shattering, but I would not crumble in front of him. Within the hour, I had checked into a small hotel in Newark, tossing my bag on the bed and collapsing into a chair. That was when my phone began to ring relentlessly. The screen lit up again and again, vibrating across the nightstand. My first instinct was to reject the call, certain it was Daniel scrambling to soothe me, to justify his cruelty with more empty words. But when I looked closely, my heart clenched. It wasn't him. It was my mother. I drew a deep breath, forcing myself to steady my trembling voice before answering. "Mom." "Emily, where are you, Linda?" Carter's voice cracked with worry. "What happened?" "Your mother-in-law just wrote something terrible in the family group chat. What did she mean when she said the baby isn't Daniel's?" "Where are you right now?" My stomach dropped. With shaking hands, I unlocked my phone and opened the family group chat. The same chat that included both my parents, Daniel's parents, and a few relatives from both sides. Usually it was a place for exchanging holiday greetings, sending photos of family dinners, wishing one another well. But tonight it had become a battlefield. I scrolled back. Just a few days ago, when I first learned I was pregnant, I had excitedly shared the news with my parents. They had been overjoyed, their happiness spilling through every message, finally seeing the daughter who had endured so much blessed with a child of her own. To them, children were the heart of marriage, the bridge that sealed a family together. That was the world they had come from, the values they carried. This morning, they had written their congratulations into the group chat, their pride evident in every word. But what followed turned my stomach. Margaret's reply cut through the screen like acid. She wrote that the dates didn't line up, that the baby couldn't possibly be Daniel's. She said it openly in front of everyone. She didn't stop there. She mocked me, mocked my parents. She called me spoiled, arrogant, a woman without proper upbringing. She said I had abandoned my marital home and run away like a brat because my parents had coddled me too much. I scrolled further, my hands trembling harder with every word. There it was in black and white, a message that felt like a knife twisting into my chest. "Emily, if you have nothing to hide, then carry the child to term. If it's really Daniel's, I will kneel and apologize. But if it isn't, don't blame us for demanding divorce. And not just divorce, your family will owe us compensation for emotional damages." My eyes burned. Each sentence was like a slap, each word another wound. The group fell silent. No one dared reply. But the silence was worse than the accusations. What destroyed me completely was Daniel's absence. Not once did he type a single word to defend me, not a single message to challenge his mother. He just sat back and let her tarnish me. Half an hour later, headlights swept across the driveway outside the hotel. My parents had come for me. I had already told them everything on the phone, but seeing them in person broke me all over again. The moment I stepped out, my mother rushed forward, pulling me into her arms. Her embrace was trembling fierce, her voice shaking with fury. "That ignorant woman," she spat, her words cracking. "She doesn't even understand the basics of medicine and still dares accuse my daughter. What was the point of sending you to college, working 2 jobs, so you could have an education when they treat you like this?" James Carter. My father laid a steadying hand on her shoulder, his expression carved in stone. He exhaled heavily, then looked at me with quiet resolve. "Come home, Emily. You shouldn't be alone in some hotel, especially now. Come home where we can take care of you." I nodded weakly, too drained to argue. That night I returned to my parents' home. For the first time in years, I felt safe. I stayed there for an entire week. 7 days passed, each one quieter than the last. Not once did Daniel call, not a single text, not a knock on the door or a plea for reconciliation. The silence spoke louder than any words. Only one message arrived, and it wasn't from Daniel. It was from Margaret. She had the audacity to text me directly, demanding I transfer money to cover the gas bill at their house. I laughed out loud, the sound bitter and sharp. My fingers flew across the keyboard. "Is your son incompetent? He's over 30 years old. If he can't even pay his own utility bills, how has he survived this long? Go ask him for money. As for me, I'm done. I've already decided to divorce Daniel." Less than a minute later, a barrage of voice notes poured into my inbox, one after another, each a full 60 seconds long. I didn't bother listening. My thumb hit the block button, severing the line of poison for good. But peace was short-lived. Moments later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. My parents glanced at the screen when his name appeared, their faces tightening with a mixture of hope and anger. Perhaps they thought he had come to his senses. Perhaps he was ready to apologize. After all, for years, Daniel had at least worn the mask of a polite, respectful son-in-law. But I knew better. I no longer believed in that mask. But I had no hope left in me. His name flashing on the screen didn't stir even the faintest flicker of relief. When I answered, my parents sat beside me on the couch, their faces carved in stone, listening in silence. "Where are you, Emily?" Daniel's voice came through sharp with annoyance. "You went back to your parents' house, didn't you? You need to remember something. You married into the Miller family. That means this house is your home now, not the Carters." My father's hand clenched tightly into a fist, but he stayed silent, waiting. I steadied my breathing, pressing the phone harder against my ear. Daniel's voice droned on, dismissive and patronizing. "You stormed out just because of a few words. What are you trying to prove running off like that? And now I hear you blocked my mother's number. She's an elder, Emily. Everything she says is only for our good. You should know better than to be so disrespectful." My chest rose and fell with fury. But my voice came out icy and controlled, each syllable sharpened to a blade. "A few words, Daniel. She dragged my name through filth in front of the entire family. She accused me of carrying another man's child. And you call that just a few words? We've known each other for years. You know who I am, or at least I thought you did. Do you actually believe this child isn't yours?" On the other end, Daniel groaned, impatient. "When did I ever say that? All I said was that the timing seems strange. I just found it odd, that's all. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Out of proportion," I whispered bitterly. "Look, he cut me off enough with the drama. I'll come pick you up tonight. Just don't tell your parents anymore about this. No need to make a big mess out of nothing. When you're home, stop working. Take care of the baby. Let my mom look after you. Once the baby is born, we'll do the DNA test, then everything will be clear and everyone will be happy. Why are you so hysterical about something so simple?" A cold laugh slipped from my lips. In his mind, I was the irrational one, the troublemaker, the wife who couldn't keep calm. But what came next nearly broke me with how absurd it sounded. Before I could speak, my father's voice thundered across the living room so loud Daniel must have felt it shake through the phone. "DNA test, my ass. Did anyone test you when you were born to make sure you belong to the Millers? My daughter has carried this baby with tears and pain, and you sit there daring to question her loyalty. If you don't want this child, I'll take her to the hospital myself tomorrow and end this pregnancy. She doesn't need a husband like you." Daniel's voice cracked instantly. "Dad, sir, please no, don't say that. You misunderstand me. I never said I don't want the baby. I never said that. I just need clarity. That's all. Please let me explain." But my father wasn't swayed. His fury only deepened, his voice cold and sharp. Daniel stuttered on the other end, the confidence draining out of him. "Mr. Carter, you're a man, you must understand. You know I have issues, fertility problems. Emily couldn't conceive for years, and suddenly the moment I go away on business, she gets pregnant. Doesn't that seem strange? But I swear, no matter what, I'll take care of her. I'll care for this baby until the truth comes out. If it's mine, I'll apologize. I'll accept whatever punishment you want. Just give me time." I couldn't even speak, the bile rising in my throat. My mother's voice cut through, trembling with rage. "Do you even hear yourself? That's the best you can offer. If it's yours, you'll apologize. We gave our daughter to your family in good faith, and this is how you repay us. With suspicion, with humiliation, with betrayal." My father was trembling now, his knuckles white. I reached for my mother's hand, trying to calm her as she trembled with fury. "Mom," I whispered softly, "don't waste your anger on people like this. They aren't worth it. I've made up my mind. I'm done with him, with them. Everything ends here." Just then, another voice pierced the line, shrill and grating enough to make me want to hurl the phone across the room. Margaret Miller had taken the phone from her son. "My son may be naive," she sneered, "but I am not. Don't pretend you're the victim, Emily. While Daniel was away, I stayed in town. I told you I was visiting family, but I stayed to watch. I saw you night after night being dropped off by some man in a nice car. Don't deny it. What husband wouldn't question that? Unless Daniel's supposed to wear horns on his head while you laugh behind his back." I froze, my pulse pounding in my ears. The room seemed to tilt. "What did you just say?" Margaret's voice rose, venom dripping from every syllable. "That's right, I never left. I've been keeping an eye on you. I saw everything. You think you're clever coming home late hiding behind work functions, but I saw that man drop you off. And don't think I didn't notice how conveniently you got pregnant right after. I felt the blood drain from my face. The realization struck me like a hammer. She had lied. She had pretended to go back to her hometown to give us space to let me focus on conceiving. But she hadn't left at all. She had stayed in New Jersey spying on me, tracking my every move like a prison warden. The betrayal made me dizzy, my grip on the phone slippery with sweat. Margaret had moved into our home years earlier, under the guise of wanting to help take care of the future grandchild she longed for. Yet years passed and no grandchild appeared, while her eyes often drifted back to the small town she came from, to the carefree nights of dancing in the square with her friends. She longed for that life, I knew she did. This time she had even bought a train ticket, and I had carefully packed gifts for her to take along so she could arrive in her hometown with pride. But the moment Daniel told her he would be away on business for 2 weeks, she canceled her ticket without a word. She stayed behind, shadowing me under the pretense of love. Daniel's away, she had said warmly, and you shouldn't be alone. I'll cook for you, keep you company. I had felt touched then, even grateful, believing her care was genuine, never suspecting her real motive. What she had called care was nothing more than surveillance. Now her venom poured through the phone, every word dripping with poison. If I hadn't stayed, I wouldn't know the truth. Look at you, Emily. No married woman in this neighborhood dresses the way you do, with your arms bare, your skirts too short, parading yourself as if you're single. And those nights when your boss drove you home, did you really think no one saw Daniel was right? The dates don't add up. You expect me to believe this baby is his? Her accusations shook me to my core. My whole body trembled as rage clawed its way up my throat. I shouted into the phone, my voice breaking. That man was my boss, Michael Anderson. He drove me home after a company dinner because he didn't want me traveling late at night by myself. That is called decency, not an affair. There was nothing between us. Margaret scoffed, the sound cold and mocking. Your boss, really? And who's to say what happens when the two of you are alone? Don't think people don't notice. Suddenly you're making more money than Daniel. Suddenly you're climbing the ladder faster than anyone else. And you want me to believe that's just hard work? No, Emily. Women like you don't get promotions without paying a price. Her words sliced into me, bitter and cruel. I laughed, the sound hollow and full of despair. Daniel has always been complacent, unwilling to push himself, content to coast through life. I fight tooth and nail for everything I have, working late, sacrificing sleep, sacrificing peace of mind, all to bring in results. My company rewarded me because I earned it. But to you, a woman who works hard, a woman who succeeds, is automatically suspect. In your world, women belong in the kitchen, silent and obedient, while men rule the house. That's your truth, Margaret, not mine. But reasoning with her was like shouting into a storm. She only believed what she wanted to believe, twisted everything into the shape that fit her prejudice. I felt my strength draining, exhaustion heavy in my bones. I had no more will to argue. My voice came out cold, stripped of warmth. Fine, divorce it is. My parents sat beside me, their faces hard with resolve. James Carter nodded once sharply. Linda gripped my hand, her eyes fierce. They agreed. Divorce was the only way forward. On the other end of the line, Daniel's voice cracked with panic. Wait, divorce, Emily? I never said I wanted a divorce. His words tumbled out in desperation, but I had no patience left, no energy for his pleas. I pressed the button and ended the call, my hand shaking. As the call clicked off, I still caught Margaret's sneering voice in the background, dripping with arrogance. Foolish girl, she's pregnant with your child, Daniel. Do you really think she has the guts to leave? Just wait. Once the baby is born, a few sweet words will soften her. She'll come crawling back. Her confidence was staggering. In her mind, I was trapped, chained by the life inside me, too afraid to break free. But she was wrong, so very wrong. This is not the past where women were bound by shame and silence. Today, women stand on their own, with independence, with careers, with voices that cannot be stifled. I had my own strength, and I had my parents behind me, loving me fiercely, standing like a wall at my back. Divorce didn't frighten me. Nothing frightened me anymore. 3 days later, the divorce papers were delivered straight to Daniel's hands. He exploded, furious, storming to my parents' house in a rage. But when he arrived, the house was empty. He didn't know that at that very moment, I was lying in a hospital bed at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, preparing for the most painful decision of my life. My parents stayed beside me constantly, not leaving even for a breath of air. That afternoon, as my mother sat at my side peeling an apple, her phone rang. She answered, and as she listened, her face drained of color. My father paused mid-slice, the knife pressing into the fruit. "What is it?" he asked, his voice cautious. My mother's eyes met mine, her expression clouded with sorrow and fury. "Who else could it be?" she whispered bitterly. "It's Margaret. She's been telling everyone that you're divorcing because you're carrying another man's child." My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. "Do you remember Susan Parker?" My mother continued, her voice trembling with restrained rage. "The woman who introduced you and Daniel in the first place." Margaret went straight to her, spewing lies, telling her that you flew into a rage because of a few innocent questions. She said if you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't have reacted so violently. My hands balled into fists, the sheets wrinkling beneath my grip. The betrayal deepened, burning through my veins. Not only had Margaret disgraced me in front of my family, but now she was poisoning the very woman who had once been our bridge. That very morning, Margaret stormed into Susan Parker's home, the woman who had once arranged the match between Daniel and me. She spun her tale shamelessly, insisting that I had demanded a divorce simply because of a few innocent questions. If I had nothing to hide, why would I have reacted so violently, she said. She even went further, sneering that if the marriage truly ended, the dowry and every wedding gift my parents had given should be kept by the Miller family as compensation for emotional damages. When my mother relayed these words to me in my hospital bed, her voice was shaking with fury. "Shameless woman, I've never in my life heard of anyone so brazen." The apple in my father's hand slipped crashing onto the floor as he stood abruptly, his chest heaving. He grabbed his coat from the chair and growled, "I'll go confront her right now." I lunged forward, clutching his sleeve, my own voice trembling. "Dad, no, that's what she wants, to stir scandal, to make a scene until the gossip swallows me whole. This city may seem large, but whispers spread like wildfire. If the rumor gains traction, my name will be ruined beyond repair." I turned toward my mother, resolve sharpening my tone. "Mom, give me Susan Parker's number." She hesitated, her brows pulling tight. "Emily, what are you planning?" "Don't do anything reckless." I didn't answer. I simply reached for the phone and dialed. When Susan's voice came through, tentative and cautious, I recounted the entire ordeal with a calm precision, laying out each moment, each accusation. When I finished, there was silence. Then finally Susan sighed. "Emily, you know I believe in you. I've always known you to be an honest woman, but Margaret's words aren't without weight. Right now you don't have proof, and without it, people will always whisper." I closed my eyes, pressing back the storm inside me. My reply came steady steel beneath the calm. "I do have a way to prove it." My mother gasped, her hand seizing mine. "Emily, no, you can't. You're not seriously thinking of keeping this baby just to prove a point, are you?" I shook my head. "Of course not. A man like Daniel doesn't deserve a child, and I won't condemn a baby to such a life. But Susan, I want you to ask Margaret one thing. If I can prove without question that this child is biologically Daniel's, will she keep her word? Will she finally shut her mouth?" Susan's efficiency surprised me. Less than an hour later, my phone rang again. Her voice was careful, but I heard the disbelief hidden in it. "Emily." She agreed. She said if DNA testing proves the baby is Daniel's, she'll kneel 3 times, bow 9 times before you in apology. She even swore she'd hand over every asset in her name to you as atonement. A bitter laugh escaped me. "Words are cheap. Promises even cheaper. I'll believe it when it's in ink." That afternoon, I contacted an attorney. Within days, a written agreement was drawn up. Under the watchful eyes of Susan Parker and the lawyer, Margaret signed her name without hesitation. She was almost smug as she left, her lips curling into a smile as sharp as a blade. "Of course, the test hasn't been done yet. Nothing is certain. Until then, don't expect me to take care of you. Stay with your parents if you must carry that pregnancy into spring. And when the baby comes in April, let's see what the truth is then." I met her condescension with a cold smile. "Don't worry, Margaret. I'll make sure you're the first to know." 2 weeks later, the results arrived. Daniel Miller was confirmed as the biological father. Word spread quickly, and for a moment I heard that Daniel and his mother had danced with relief, their joy palpable. Their long nightmare was over, they thought. Then my phone rang. Daniel's voice came rushing through, frantic, almost breathless, but threaded with something darker, blame. "Emily, I knew it. I knew the baby was mine. But why? Why would you risk it?" The doctor said those prenatal DNA tests carry risks. What if something had happened? Are you and the baby okay? Did you even think before you acted? For the first time in years, I heard something like concern in his tone, though twisted with reproach. In his mind, it was over, a misunderstanding wiped clean. Life could return to what it had been. Before I could respond, Margaret's syrupy voice cut in. Suddenly sweet, almost cloying. "Emily, my dear girl, let me come get you. Tell me what you're craving, I'll buy it all. You don't know, child, but caring for a pregnant woman is an art, and no one knows better than I do. Your mother may have raised daughters, but she never carried a grandson. This is different." She stressed the last word with triumph, her pride swelling around the phrase "a baby boy," as though it were already written in stone. Her words rolled through me like ice. Even in supposed apology, even in victory, her obsession with bloodlines and gender poisoned everything. She thought she had won. She thought this baby tied me to them forever, but she didn't know me at all. When my parents heard Margaret's proud declaration that I was finally carrying a boy, their faces turned as dark as storm clouds. To them, this family had shown its true colors, selfish, shameless, and blinded by a twisted obsession with sons. At that moment, my own conviction hardened. I knew I had made the right choice. On the other end of the line, Daniel was still babbling, painting his fantasy of a perfect family, of cradling a child in his arms, of everything being forgiven and forgotten. I let his words linger for a moment before cutting through his illusions with the sharp edge of truth. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "Daniel, I ended the pregnancy." The silence that followed was deafening. A beat passed, then another. Finally, his voice cracked hollow with disbelief. What did you just say?" A cold laugh escaped me. "You and your mother begged me to have a child, swore that it would heal everything. But when I finally conceived, neither of you celebrated. Instead, you accused me, humiliated me, treated my baby as if it were some dirty secret. Tell me, does a family like yours deserve children at all? No. It's better that the Miller bloodline ends here, extinguished once and for all." I drew in a steady breath and my tone hardened. "And Daniel, don't forget you and your mother signed an agreement. She promised that if I proved the baby was yours, every asset in her name would belong to me. I had the DNA results. The baby was yours. That contract is ironclad, and you both will honor it." The silence on the other side stretched oppressive and suffocating. Then suddenly a scream tore through the receiver, sharp and agonized. It was Margaret. I heard Daniel shout her name, his voice breaking into sobs. Margaret Miller had lived for years with hypertension, her condition managed only by strict medication. But that night, upon learning I had terminated the pregnancy, the fragile balance shattered. She collapsed unconscious before Daniel could even call for help. By the time she was rushed to New York Presbyterian, the damage was done. A massive stroke had left her paralyzed on one side, bound to a wheelchair, dependent on others for every meal, every bath, every breath of dignity. Daniel clung to me like a drowning man, desperate and crazed. He refused divorce, clutched at my clothes in court hallways, spat venom into my voicemail. "You monster!" he snarled one night, his voice thick with rage. "You killed your own child. I swear I'll never sign those papers. I'll drag this out until you beg me for mercy. I'll make you regret every breath." But I only smiled coldly. "Suffer your own consequences, Daniel. You were the one who doubted me first. You and your mother cornered me until I had no choice. You thought I would be weak, but I am not the kind of woman you can destroy." The signed contract was my shield. With it, my attorney tore through every excuse Daniel tried to build. Within months, the judge's gavel struck. The divorce was granted. Full division of assets fell into my favor. For the first time in years, I could breathe. On the day Daniel came to move out of the New Jersey house my parents had helped us buy, I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching as he tried to maneuver Margaret from her bed to a wheelchair. She weighed barely 150 pounds, yet to him, she was dead weight. He grunted, sweat pouring down his temples, his breath ragged. At last, his strength gave out. He stumbled, dropped her onto the floor, and I heard the sickening crack of bone. Margaret wailed in agony, her face twisted in pain, but Daniel did not rush to help her. He collapsed beside her instead, eyes vacant, muttering like a madman, crying, always crying. "This is all your fault. If it weren't for you, Emily would never have left. If it weren't for you, she wouldn't have ended it. You ruined everything. You ruined me." His mother's moans filled the air, but he only kept blaming her, his voice breaking with each accusation. It was grotesque, a tragic parody of filial love, twisted into mutual resentment, a family devouring itself from the inside out. Years passed. I heard fragments of their fate from Susan Parker, who always seemed to know every whisper in town. Margaret's condition worsened until she was bedridden, unable to lift even a spoon to her lips. Daniel abandoned his career, retreating to a decaying house in rural Pennsylvania, where he cared for her in sullen silence. Then, one spring morning, a neighbor noticed a stench seeping from the windows. He knocked, called out, but there was no answer. When he pushed open the door, the horror inside froze him where he stood. Margaret lay rigid in bed, her cheeks hollow. Her lips cracked, her eyes wide and unblinking, death etched into every line of her face. She had died of starvation. The police investigation revealed the unthinkable. Daniel had watched her waste away. He had stopped feeding her, stopped trying, stopped caring. He had let his own mother rot in that bed. At trial, he showed no remorse. He stood tall, his expression empty, his eyes vacant. But when the judge pronounced the sentence death, his facade cracked. For a brief, fleeting second, fear lit his eyes. A bitter smile tugged at his mouth, and he whispered words that would echo in my memory forever. If I could go back, if I could start again, maybe it wouldn't be this way. But life doesn't offer second chances. There is no medicine for regret. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.